British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty, saying the current administration is reviewing its international engagements.
Canada won't sell its soul, or its lakes, just because a thirsty superpower wants to twist the tap. And if Donald Trump thinks Canada is a giant faucet to fix America's drought, he's about to learn the difference between a water shortage and a sovereignty check. In the next minutes, you'll learn how a single idea, piping Canadian freshwater south, morphs from common sense to geopolitical grenade, the real drought math in the American West, the legal traps that would lock Canada into forever exports, the environmental blowback no pipeline can outrun, and why Ottawa is framing water not as trade, but as national defense. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. This isn't a policy chat. It's a power test. One side sees water as a commodity you can move like oil. The other sees water as the spine of a nation, identity, ecology, sovereignty, all in one word. The friction starts the moment a politician calls Canada a faucet, and it explodes when drought makes that metaphor sound like a plan. Start with the West. The Colorado River is overpromised, its reservoirs scarred with bathtub rings that don't lie. Lake Mead and Lake Powell yo-yo up and down with urgent cuts and wet winters that can't undo decades of structural deficit. Cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas hustle for new supply, farmers fight for their season, and conservation is no longer a virtue, it's rent. Into that pain walks an old, easy story. Canada has so much, America needs a little. Let's be practical. Simple, seductive, wrong. Why wrong? Because water isn't oil. Oil burned is gone. Water exported can rewire an entire watershed. Move enough of it, and you don't just change a map, you change a climate, a fishery, a treaty, a way of life. And once you put a price on a river, you don't just make a sale, you make a precedent. Contracts outlive politicians. Arbitration outmuscles elections. You don't negotiate each shipment, you negotiate your sovereignty. Ottawa gets this. That's why the message coming out of Canada has been firm. Water is not a tradable widget. It's a public trust. Call that moral if you like. It's also brutally practical. The minute water becomes an export, it becomes subject to market rules and trade obligations. You can't easily turn off the tap once it's on, not without someone suing you in a forum designed to protect buyers, not basins. That is the nightmare. A nation forced by paper to send out lifeblood it needs at home. Look north and you'll see why Canadians treat this as existential. Nearly a fifth of the world's freshwater touches that flag. It sculpts their geography, powers their economy, defines their wilderness. You don't auction your identity. You defend it. And defense is the right word because climate pressure is already tightening the vice. Melting snowpacks, weird rain, fire seasons that now get their own names. In that world, selling water isn't revenue. It's ransom. But what about cooperation? Ask the dealmakers. Pipelines, shared infrastructure, win-win. Here's the counter. The bigger the pipe, the smaller the choice is. Build a cross-border water highway and you aren't borrowing the odd gallon. You're hardwiring a dependency with lobbyists, debt, and sunk cost politics attached. History shows how this goes. Once an industry exists, it exists to grow. The rhetoric starts as emergency relief. It ends as supply chain. Meanwhile, environmental costs don't wait for the balance sheet. Diverting freshwater can starve wetlands, stress salmon runs, and scramble entire food webs. You can mitigate around the edges. You can't negotiate with the watershed. Every liter that leaves is a vote against resilience at home. What actually happens if the drought worsens? Pressure. Not just polite phone calls, structural pressure. Friends help friends. Security partners support each other. The story will be framed as alliance, regional stability, humanitarian need. And that's exactly why Canada is setting bright lines now. When the ask comes dressed in higher purpose, you need your answer ready. Zoom out further, and you'll see this isn't just North America's story. Water wars used to sound like a sci-fi tagline. Today it's in white papers, city budgets, and investor memos. The 21st century's quiet arms race isn't tanks, it's aquifers, glaciers, and legal titles to both. Whoever can secure clean, reliable water owns the time to think, build, and grow. That's power. And power, never forget, invites pressure. Here's where the politics get thorny. In the US, the pitch is framed as common sense. Canada earns revenue. America buys time. Everyone wins. But economics without ecology is a fairy tale, and economics without law is fan fiction. If Canada opens the door even a crack, future governments could be boxed in by contracts and tribunals that don't care about next year's snowpack or the salmon that didn't return. If you're Ottawa, That's not trade. That's handcuffs. So, where does real cooperation live? Not in exporting rivers, but in killing demand, recycling and reuse at scale. Aggressive agricultural transitions out of the thirstiest crops in the thirstiest basins. Urban retrofits that make wastewater a myth. Smart desalination paired with clean energy where coasts make sense. Treaty-honoring management of shared waters that already exist, with transparency the public can audit. That's hard, unglamorous, and exactly the point. You fix a century of overallocation with decades of discipline, not one big pipe from someone else's future. Canada's playbook reflects that. Conservation, restoration, and climate adaptation framed as security policy, not just green branding. Protect the basin, fortify the grid, harden communities, and keep the decision rights at home. It's stewardship as strategy. And strategy as survival. Here's the edge you came for. The thing most viewers miss that will decide how this ends. This debate isn't really about gallons. It's about governance. The side that defines water as a public trust will set rules that survive the weather. The side that defines water as a product will chase price spikes until the contract writes the policy. One path preserves choice. The other sells it. If America wants out of the drought spiral, it has to do the hardest thing a superpower can do: change itself before it tries to change its neighbor. And if Canada wants to keep its advantage, it has to do the hardest thing a resource nation can do: say no when yes looks profitable and maybe looks polite, because in the end, water is the last thing you should want to be famous for exporting. Not when the century ahead will be defined by who kept enough to think clearly. Not when the real flex isn't how much you sell, but how well you can sleep knowing your grandchildren won't have to buy it back.